He skied down from 8,080 meters on Nanga Parbat. He closed out all 5 7,000ers of the former Soviet Union, the first Italian ever to do it. He held his partner for 2 days at 7,000 meters in the Karakoram and waited for the helicopter. And then, on the 8th of February, 2021, on an ordinary Monday, Carlalberto, Cala, Cimenti, set out onto a familiar slope below the Col Chalvet pass, 20 kilometers from home. Altitude, 2,000 meters. Danger level, moderate. A couloir he had skied dozens of times. Why is it that the most experienced man turns out to be the most vulnerable exactly where everything is familiar? Turin, 1975. Turin, the 14th of February, 1975. A boy is born into the Cimenti family and registered as Carlalberto. Later, in documents and newspapers, another form will turn up as well, Carlo Alberto. Neither will stick. To everyone, he will simply be Cala, a short name from home that will travel with him through the Pamirs, the Himalaya, and the Karakoram. His father is the one who brings him into the mountains. Charlie Cimenti is no coach and no mentor from a sports club. He simply takes his son along, the way you take someone on a family trip. Cala comes to the summits through the habit of weekends, not through club discipline. From the very start, the mountains are a place you go with family. At 12, he climbs Mont Blanc, 4,808 meters, the highest point in Western Europe, a mountain many adults prepare for over years. He goes roped up with his father. For a teenager, it isn't a record and it isn't a claim on the future. It's just the longest day he has ever had. After that, the details get scarce. The sources record only that in his youth, he climbs Ojos del Salado, about 6,893 meters, the highest point of the Andes. Around the same time, Kilimanjaro. Around the same time, several 6,000ers in Nepal. There are no exact dates for any of these climbs. Biographers reconstruct them after the fact, from interviews and passing mentions, and fold them into a single line. By the time people start writing about him, he has already been on 3 continents. As for where he studied and how he earned a living before climbing became a profession, nothing at all has survived. That's a rare thing for a man whose life will later be taken apart by the press day by day. The beginning of the biography stays almost blank. All we know is the direction it's moving in. He ties his adult life to the Western Alps. Turin stays in the paperwork. He settles in Pragalato, a small village in the province of Turin, among slopes, lifts, and winter roads. From here he will leave for his expeditions, and to here he will come back. Pragalato becomes his permanent point of reference, a place where the mountains start right outside the window, and for that reason, never feel like an event. Mountains outside the window, sooner or later, stop being enough. In 2005, Cala goes to the Himalaya and climbs Cho Oyu, 8,201 meters, his first 8,000er. The climb goes the classic way, up on foot, down on foot, no skis on the descent. He uses no supplementary oxygen, not here and not anywhere afterwards. Later, he'll explain the absence of skis simply. Back then, he was too young for a descent like that. It sounds matter of fact, but you can already hear what will become his rule. He states his principle without decoration. If he does something, he does it under his own power, without help. A cylinder of oxygen doesn't fit into that logic. He doesn't argue with the people who use it, he just leaves it outside the brackets of his own work. Cho Oyu shows the main thing. He acclimatizes successfully and finishes a climb at 8,000 meters. What stays open is the other question. What to do with that altitude next? Walking the classic routes behind the big expeditions clearly bores him. The answer comes 5 years later, on a mountain almost 1.5 kilometers lower. In 2010, he climbs Alma Dablam, 6,812 meters, alone, no partner, no intermediate camps, in the style climbers call one push. Start from the bottom and work without stopping to the summit and back. The whole thing takes about 26 hours. He picks the monsoon period, the time most expeditions avoid, because the faces get soaked with wet snow and visibility disappears for hours at a stretch. For a fast solo push, conditions like that make the route substantially harder. Even so, he keeps climbing. After Alma Dablam, it becomes clear where he's heading. Speed and self-reliance settle in as his working style. He doesn't build multi-week sieges with a chain of camps and caravans of porters. He picks a short window and takes the mountain in one go while the weather allows. A style like that sits badly with the classic tactics of the big expeditions. It assumes a different relationship with time, not the patient stacking up of altitude, but a bet on a single push. But speed has one awkward property. Going up fast is possible. Coming down means the same fixed ropes and the same steps as everyone else, and the descent takes no less strength than the climb. That half of the problem he hasn't solved yet. The solution turns up a year later, and it looks almost obvious for a man who grew up in Pragalato. If the descent takes as much strength as the climb, then you have to come down differently. In 2011, Cala climbs Manaslu, 8,163 meters, the 8th highest peak in the world, without supplementary oxygen, as always. And from the summit, for the first time, he clicks into his skis. The Italian press will write afterwards that he became the first of his countrymen to ski down from Manaslu. That claim will travel from one article to the next. There's no independent confirmation of it, not then and not now, but for Cala himself, the question of being first is secondary. What matters is something else. He has found his own way of dealing with a mountain. After Manaslu, the ski descent becomes a compulsory part of every climb he makes, a condition of the problem, not a finale for the camera. A summit without a ski descent stops interesting him. He isn't just a high-altitude climber anymore. He's a high-altitude skier, and that's a completely different profession. A climber needs the mountain to let him up. A skier needs it to let him down, and that's a far more capricious demand. For the classic climber, a fern slope blown down to bare ice is only a help. It's easier to walk on in crampons. For a skier, that same slope becomes extremely difficult and dangerous. Soft, fresh snow, on the other hand, is comfortable to ski, but it can create the risk of a slab releasing. So the whole calculation changes. The snow, the steepness of the slope, and the time of day become more important than the summit itself. In the morning, the crust holds. By midday, the top layer turns to slush. By evening, it freezes over into a shell, and each of those 3 hours calls for its own technique. Cala learns to read these states the way an ordinary climber reads a weather forecast. He starts planning the outing from the line of descent, not from the summit. Skis get written about as a spectacular finale, but they have a strictly practical property as well. The descent cuts the time spent up high by several times over. What takes a whole day on foot can be covered on skis in an hour. At 8,000 meters, where the body gets worse with every hour spent there, that isn't only aesthetics, it's a way of cutting the time at altitude. He doesn't know yet that in 2 years, this logic will take him somewhere completely away from the Himalaya, to the Pamirs and the Tian Shan, to summits that almost nobody in Italy counts as trophies. Those mountains, though, have a scoring system of their own. The title of Snow Leopard was established on the 12th of October, 1967, by a Soviet sporting body, and it's set up with absolute strictness. You can't earn it with one outstanding climb. You need all 5 7,000ers of the former Soviet Union, the whole set, no exceptions and no substitutions. Between 1981 and 2010, the title went to 567 people, 29 of them women. Not one of them is Italian. Cala takes on the program the way he takes on everything, without stretching it over a decade. In 2013, he does 3 summits in a single season. Peak Korzenievskaya, 7,105 meters. Peak Lenin, 7,134 meters. And Can Tingri, 7,010 meters. On each of the 3, he goes up on foot and comes down on skis. In a few weeks, half the list is closed. 2 are left, and both are harder than the ones before. On the 13th of August, 2014, he sets out on Peak Pobeda, 7,439 meters. This mountain has a reputation that doesn't rest on its height. It stands further north than the others, catches the air coming off Siberian latitudes, and holds a cold on its ridge that you won't find on any 8,000er. Peak Pobeda is considered the hardest and the coldest of the 5, and it's where the program ends for most of those who get that far. He does that one too. What's left is the highest point on the list. On the 19th of August, 2015, Cala climbs Peak Communism, 7,495 meters, and skis down from it. Nobody had ever skied this summit before him. His descent becomes the first in the mountain's history. 5 summits closed. So, an Italian receives the title of Snow Leopard for the first time. A line in a register kept thousands of kilometers from Turin, and the thing that finally settles his public name. The Italian press translates the title literally, Il Leopardo delle Nevi, Snow Leopard. The phrase lands so neatly that it almost immediately comes loose from where it came from. Readers start taking it as a nickname, a beautiful animal one, dreamed up by journalists. Few remember that behind it stand a dry set of sporting rules and 5 specific mountains. But now he has a name people recognize without explanation, and a reputation as the man who closes lists all the way to the end. Now he can move without anyone else's rulebook. In 2016, Cala goes back to Peak Lenin, a mountain he has already been on, but he takes it differently. The North Face, the Arkan route, solo. Up and down take about 14 hours. The route done in a single day of light, with no chain of intermediate camps. He doesn't need a new summit just to tick it off. What interests him is how fast and how cleanly you can do something you already know. A mountain climbed once becomes a route for testing his style. A year later, he heads back to the Himalaya. On the 8th of October, 2017, Cala climbs Dhaulagiri, 8,156 meters, the 7th highest peak in the world. He starts the ski descent not from the very top. The sources disagree, giving anything from 7,000 to 7,400 meters. The spread is easy to explain. On the upper section that season, there's bare ice, and clicking in there would have meant raising the risk for nothing. He walks down to the place where the snow starts to hold, and only then puts on his skis. But the main event of this expedition happens not on the route, but down below. At Dhaulagiri Base Camp, he proposes to Erika Sifredi. The setting is chosen with no theater at all, simply the place where he spends a large part of his life. In 2018, they marry. From that moment, his biography contains a quantity that wasn't there before. Expeditions stop being only his own business. A solo climb cut down to 14 hours looks impressive in a report, but somebody at home is counting those hours now, and for that person, they add up to completely different arithmetic. Cala doesn't change his style. He still climbs without oxygen, still picks short, fast windows, still goes alone where he thinks he should. But every trip now means that in Pragelato, somebody is watching a dot on a map that is either moving or standing still. That dot will become an important detail in the whole of the rest of his story. While it moves, the people watching know the route is going on. When it stops, there's no way to reach him or find out why. 2 years later, the marker will one day stay motionless for almost a full hour high on a mountain. That hour is still a year away, and the year is spent in the Karakoram. In 2018, Cala climbs Layla Peak, 6,096 meters. By Himalayan standards, a modest summit, but what it's known for has nothing to do with height. Layla Peak is an almost perfect triangle with a snow and ice face so steep that photographs of this mountain have been going round the catalogs for years as the model of an ideal ski line. Height means nothing here. The angle does. He skis the northwest face together with Matthias Koenig and Julian Denzer, and finds out he's too late. A few days earlier, the first ski descent of that face was made by a French team. The gap is a matter of days, but in climbing gaps like that don't get split down the middle. The first stays with the French finally and without discussion. He doesn't get the first, but this descent confirms his experience of skiing difficult terrain. What's left is to find a mountain where repeating somebody else's line is already impossible. In the summer of 2019, he sets off for Nanga Parbat, 8,126 meters. The mountain stands on the western edge of the Himalaya on its own, an enormous solitary massif. Some Italian publications at the time wrongly placed it in the Karakoram that comes from the closeness of the Pakistani routes, but geographically, this is the Himalaya, their last western summit. He works in a team with the Russians Vitaly Lazo and Anton Pugovkin. The expedition is filmed as their joint project. All three have the same idea, not just to climb, but to ski down from 8,000 meters and get it on camera. The route they choose is the classic one for this face, the Kinchofer line, which most successful ascents follow. In those same days, Sergei Mingote and Ali Sadpara are working on the mountain, names known to anyone who follows high-altitude climbing. The season is crowded, the face is busy, the weather windows have to be shared. Cala's task, though, is different from almost everyone else's. They need to reach the summit and come back. He needs to reach the summit, click into his skis right there, at an altitude where every movement costs an effort, and find a line down a face he has only seen in photographs. The descent needed its own assessment of conditions, and that could only be made on the spot. The test comes on the 3rd of July, 2019. Cala reaches the summit of Nanga Parbat, the point from which, more than 40 years earlier, Messner began the solo descent that became widely known. Cala doesn't stay up there long. He clicks into his skis at about 8,080 meters and starts down. The face below him is nothing like a prepared piste. It's an alternation of fern, ice, and wind-packed snow running for kilometers, where the line isn't always visible in advance. On one section, Lazo suggests taking the skis off and walking it. Cala refuses, and later publishes the episode himself. He means to carry on skiing. Shortly before that, still on the summit, he sends his wife a message. Just one sentence. He's lying on top of the world, crying, laughing, and loving her. It will survive, and a year later, give his book its title. There's no record-breaking rhetoric in it, and no posing. Just a man who has reached the limit of what he's capable of, and at that moment is thinking about home. Then comes a long stop in the GPS track. His GPS track stops showing any movement. The dot on the map that dozens of people in Italy are following freezes on the slope and doesn't shift a single meter. 10 minutes go by, 20, half an hour. An hour later, it's still in the same place. At 8,000 meters an hour without movement can mean a man is resting, or that he can't keep going. There's no way to work out the reason from below. There's no contact and no picture from the scene. There's only a coordinate, motionless on a screen, with no other information about what's going on. That's long enough for people in Pragalado to start running through the possibilities and talking over the reasons for the stop. Then the dot moves. He gets down safely. The reason for the stop stays his own business. Tiredness, changing boots, looking for the line, and no dramatic explanation for it ever turns up. The ski descent from Nanga Parbat has happened, and it's the high point of his career. An 8,000er climbed without oxygen and skied down from almost the very summit. The expedition is over. He stays on in Pakistan. There's one more mountain ahead, far lower, and, by every calculation, far simpler. In 2.5 weeks, there will be an accident there. That mountain stands 200 kilometers to the east, in the very heart of the Karakoram, and it's called Gasherbrum VII, 6,955 meters, almost 1,200 meters lower than Nanga Parbat. On a first assessment, the route ahead ought to be simpler than the last one, but Gasherbrum VII has one feature that explains why Cala is here. By 2019, nobody had climbed this summit. It stands in the shadow of its famous neighbors, Gasherbrum I and Gasherbrum II, where expeditions turn up every year, and it stays unclimbed simply because it isn't on any prestigious list. Not an 8,000er, not a legend. For a man who can read gaps like that, it's a rare chance. His partner is Francesco Cassardo, a doctor by profession and a former rugby player, a solidly built man with a completely different sporting past. They pick the northeast face, about 700 meters high and up to 60 degrees steep. On a slope like that, a man standing on it can touch the snow with an outstretched arm without leaning in. They go alpine style, with no preparation of the route, no fixed ropes, no stocked camps, no repeated pushes. Everything they need, they carry on their backs. They plan to do the route in a single push. On the 20th of July, 2019, it works. Cala reaches the summit of Gasherbrum VII, the first man in the mountain's history to do it. After the summit, he starts the ski descent, a first ascent, and a first ski descent in one day. Cassardo is lower down at that moment. He has come up to about 6,800 meters and is waiting for his partner for the way down. Then the way back begins, with the tiredness that has built up, and with the snow on the face change by that hour. On the descent, Cassardo falls. He falls about 450 meters, almost half of the face they had climbed a few hours earlier. After the fall, the sporting objective is over, and the one thing that matters is getting Cassardo out. Cala is left on the route alone, at almost 7,000 meters, 2 days from any help. His partner is below him. From this moment, Cala uses everything he knows to get down to him and organize help. The summit no longer means anything at all. Cala sees the fall and is the first to reach Cassardo, coming down that same face. His partner is alive. Cala gives first aid with what he has to hand, and understands the main thing: Cassardo isn't going down on his own. So the descent is off. So they stay here, above 6,000 meters, until help comes. When it will come, nobody knows. Night falls. At that altitude, the risk of a motionless man getting chilled through rises sharply after dark. Cala has no tent pitched on a comfortable platform and no stove that can burn forever. All night, he stays beside his partner and warms him with the heat of his own body. A few hours ago, he made the first ascent in this mountain's history. Now, his job is to hold his partner's condition together until morning. The next day, Denis Urubko comes up to them with oxygen and Don Bowie with him. Along with them come 3 Polish climbers who were coming down Gasherbrum II at the time. So an international group forms on the face that nobody put together. People from different expeditions drop their own plans and go up. The helicopter doesn't come straight away. Evacuation by the Pakistani army only becomes possible on the 22nd of July, 2 days after the fall. All that time, Cassardo's condition has to be held together at high altitude. Cassardo survives. This detail will get retold inaccurately later on. In the popular versions of the story, the role of the rescued man often goes to Cala himself, a neat line about the climber who survived in the Karakoram. In fact, the one who survived and was rescued was Cassardo. Cala was the one doing the rescuing. Professional recognition comes separately. The Payoles d'Or 2020 list of significant ascents includes Gasherbrum VII as a first ascent and a first ski descent of the northeast face. The wording is dry and sporting and reflects nothing of 2 nights on the slope. In Italy, over a single summer, he becomes far better known than he ever expected. A man known until then to a narrow circle is a national hero, not for a summit, but for not going down alone. Fame like that needs a form, and the form finds itself. On the 3rd of June, 2020, his book comes out, Sdraiato in cima al mondo, lying on top of the world. That same sentence from the message to his wife, sent from 8,126 meters, becomes the title. The subtitle points to both expeditions of that summer, to the summit of Nanga Parbat and to Gasherbrum VII. Between those 2 points fits everything that made him interesting to the public, the record, and the thing that matters more than the record. Almost at the same time, the story gets pictures. The documentary about the Nanga Parbat expedition is made by Vitaly Lazo, the same partner who suggested he take his skis off on the face. In 2020, the film takes prizes at festivals in Sestriere and Orobié. The descent from 8,000 meters, which until then existed only as a GPS track and as stories, can now be watched. Cala steps into a role that's new for him. He speaks at mountain festivals, gives lectures, works with equipment manufacturers. A man who for 15 years preferred short self-contained trips with no witnesses finds himself on a stage in front of full halls. He turns out to be rather good at it. He speaks plainly, with no grandeur, and none of the pose of a man who has been where the rest of us can't go. But the 2020 season turns out nothing like the one before. Traveling outside Italy becomes impossible. The Karakoram, the Himalaya, the Pamirs, all of it closes at once and for an indefinite time. The expedition calendar he has lived by for more than 10 years resets to 0. For the first time in many years, his season comes down to the Alps at home. From the outside, it looks like a pause, forced and temporary. He's waiting for the borders to open and planning the next big projects. And meanwhile, he does what every mountain man does in a free season. He walks the slopes he can see from his window. There's a certain irony in this that nobody notices at the time. A man whose reputation is built on 8,000 meters and on summits only a handful ever reach goes back to what he started with at 12, to ordinary days out in his home mountains, to routes that make it into no report and need no permits, no visas, and no helicopters. And, as it turns out, to the ones where he doesn't spend the winter alone. His regular partner on these outings is Patrick Negro. They live in the same village, Pragalato, that same place in the province of Turin, where Cala moved from the city many years ago. Negro is around 50. The sources vary between 49 and 50. He's a local in the fullest sense of the word, a man of the valley for whom these mountains aren't a place for expeditions, but the geography of everyday life. In the village they call him Sherpa, the one who carries the most, moves the most steadily, and never complains. Everybody who walks these slopes knows him. He works within the Sestriere Resort, one of the biggest ski centers in Piedmont, the one that hosted the Olympic events of 2006. In winter, that means working with pistas, machinery, and people on the slopes. In his free time, he's a volunteer with the Valley's Rescue and Medical Services, the man who turns out when somebody in the mountains is in trouble. Negro was never a media figure. The magazines didn't write about him, the festivals didn't invite him, his name wasn't on any list of achievements. His mountains were local ones, and that was enough for him. What connects him and Cala isn't a project and isn't a sponsorship deal. Just two men from the same village who go out together because they live 2 steps apart and look at snow the same way. One is known across Italy, the other within 2 valleys. On the slope, that difference means precisely nothing. For both of them, the slopes above Sestriere aren't an expedition. It's the usual outing: leave the house, gain the altitude, be back by evening. No months of preparation, no base camps, no paperwork. The couloirs of the Val de Susa are their ordinary working geography, skied dozens of times. That figure, dozens of times, holds the main peculiarity of home mountains. A familiar slope stops being read as a task. It turns into a road. You know where the steep part starts, where it's easier to traverse, where the best snow usually lies. The experience built up on this slope works without fail, right up until the slope itself stops being the same. And the snow settles fresh every winter. And the winter that arrives at the end of 2020 will settle in a way nothing like the ones before. It starts with Italy's ski resorts being shut. The lifts stand still, the pistes aren't groomed, the slopes usually rolled flat by the snowcats are left, the way the wind left them. And then something happens that nobody planned. Thousands of people used to skiing groomed pistes head up on foot, ski touring, on skins, off to the side of the closed runs. Among them are experienced mountain skiers. There are also completely unprepared ones, people who for the first time in their lives find themselves on a slope with no markings, no patrol, and no snowcat that has been through in the night. That's the first half of the problem. The second is in the snow itself. That winter in Piedmont, a dangerous structure holds in the snowpack. The cause is a long westerly and northwesterly wind that spends weeks moving snow off the ridges and laying it down on the lee slopes in dense sheets. Sheets like that are called slabs. From the outside, they look solid, they're comfortable to walk on, the skis hold. Underneath them lies something else, a weak base of faceted crystals, a loose, granular layer that forms when the snow cover is thin and the frosts are hard. It doesn't bind the slab to the ground. It lies between them like a layer of ball bearings. A load in one single spot is enough for that layer to collapse, and then the whole slab, hundreds of tons of it, goes down the slope as one single sheet. The most awkward property of that structure is that it gives no signs. From the outside, the surface looks even and quiet. No cracks, no collapses, no booming underfoot. Experience built up on this same slope in earlier years is no help here. The statistics of that season record it without comment. Half of the incidents fall on danger level 3Is, not extreme, not critical, but the middle of the scale, the level at which people carry on going out. And one more figure that goes against common sense. Almost everyone who didn't come back in Piedmont that winter was an experienced person, not tourists out for the first time, not beginners who went up the wrong way, people who had known their slopes for decades. Experience protects you from the mistakes you're able to recognize. Against what lies under an even surface and gives nothing away, it's powerless. The 8th of February 2021 is a Monday, an ordinary working day with no holiday behind it and no weekend crowd on the slopes. Cala and Patrick Negro set out ski touring in the area of the Col Chalvet Pass, near the summit of Cima del Bosco. The slope drops away into the Argentera Valley in the commune of Saus di Cesena. This is the Sestriere area, half an hour's drive from home, a place you don't plan a trip to, you just go. That day the bulletin from the Piedmont service ARPA Piemonte declares avalanche danger level 3 across the whole alpine arc of the region. On the international 5-point scale that's considerable, the middle. The wording means a likelihood of avalanches of medium, and in places large size. It isn't a ban, and it isn't an emergency warning. It's exactly the level at which most mountain people in the Alps go about their work, professionals included. Both are carrying ARTVA avalanche transceivers, devices that send out a signal in transmit mode and pick up somebody else's in search mode. Standard kit for any outing off the pistes. There's no information about avalanche airbag packs. In the second half of the day, an avalanche comes down the couloir. It runs about 200 meters. The release point is at roughly 2,000 meters, not high by alpine standards, lower than most of the passes they had been crossing for years. 200 meters is a comparatively short run, but even an avalanche like that is seriously dangerous. What happens next is reconstructed from reports out of the valley. Nobody sees the release and nobody raises the alarm from the scene. Down below, all anyone knows is that 2 men went out in the morning and were due back. At around 4:55 in the afternoon, the Carabinieri and Sestriere get a message. 2 men haven't returned. The alarm is raised by Cala's family, the same people who for years watched a moving dot on a map when he was in the Himalaya, in the Pamirs, in the Karakoram. This time the mountain is half an hour's drive from Pragelato. By that hour, the February day in the mountains is nearly done. In 40 minutes, it will be dark. Carlalberto Cimenti's 46th birthday was 6 days away. The first thing the rescuers do is look at the slope. Technicians of the Piedmont Mountain Rescue Service use binoculars straight from the valley without going up, and almost at once they spot the track of an avalanche below the Col Chalvet. From below, it shows up as a strip of disturbed snow. The air ambulance is brought into the search. The helicopter comes into the release zone and winches down a rescuer and a dog team as well, a handler and a dog trained to work an avalanche deposit. The ARTVA signal is picked up quickly. That means both devices are working and both are here, within the avalanche deposit. The location is fixed to within a few meters. The machine makes 2 rotations, delivering mixed teams of mountain rescuers and Guardia di Finanza up top. Then the light goes. February dusk in the mountains comes down suddenly, and the helicopter has to return to base. Winch work in the dark on a steep slope is impossible. Some of the rescuers come up on foot, on skins, by the same way the 2 men went that morning. For a systematic search, they use probes, long metal poles. The snow is worked through on a grid. Both men are found at the foot of the avalanche, under more than 2 meters of snow. A depth of more than 2 meters substantially complicates and slows down both the search and the recovery. Neither of them came back. The available official statements give the cause as an avalanche on a steep slope at danger level 3. They contain no reports of faulty equipment, of a lack of preparation, or of going into a knowingly closed area. The mayor of Cesana commented on it briefly. It's always the most experienced who take the risk, and he added that they had skied this couloir dozens of times. The awkward logic of mountain accidents is simple. A man who goes out rarely takes a risk occasionally. A man who goes out constantly builds up not only experience but also a number of outings, and with it, the chance of one day being on the slope at exactly the hour it's ready to release. Cala, who had skied down from 8,000 meters, died in an avalanche at 2,000 and was found under more than 2 meters of snow. They are buried on the 11th of February, 2021, and the farewell takes place in 2 places at once. That isn't an accident of organization, but an exact reflection of how their lives were arranged. 2 men from neighboring valleys, each with his own circle. Patrick Negro is farewelled in Pomeretto, in the Val Germanasca. Cala, in Sausa di Cesana, in the same place where their last route ran a few days earlier. In Pragelato, the village where they both lived, a day of mourning is declared. Cala's family asks people not to gather a crowd. Instead, bring beer or wine for a shared toast. The request sounds unexpected for a day like that, but to anyone who knew him, nothing needs explaining. A man who at 8,000 meters wrote to his wife that he was laughing and crying at the same time would hardly have wanted to be seen off in silence. What remains afterwards begins a few months later. On the 3rd of July, 2021, the local rescue service station in Pragelato is given Patrick Negro's name. A memorial plaque goes up on the building. The logic of that decision is flawless. A man who for years went out to help others in these same mountains stays here as a name. Not as a climber, not as a record holder, as the Sherpa everybody in the 2 valleys knew. Cala's book carries on, living a life of its own. It's reprinted, sold, read in the branches of the Italian Alpine Club. That sentence from Nanga Parbat now stands on the cover, and it stays the thing new readers hear from him. The film about the expedition stays freely available. The ski descent from 8,080 meters can be watched at any moment. The camera records him as he works his way down the route. It makes for a strange symmetry. one he can hardly have expected. His high-altitude expedition survives as a document available to anyone. And an ordinary February outing on the slope behind the village, the one that needed no visa, no permit, and no film crew, left not a single frame behind. There's only what's known from the reports, and what stayed unknown for good. The unknown turns out to be bigger than anyone would like, and it starts with the scale. This tragedy coincided with a hard winter for world mountaineering. In January of the same year, Sergei Mingote fell on K2. Ali Sadpara went missing there as well, on the 5th of February, 3 days before Cala went out onto his home slope. Both had been on Nanga Parbat in the summer of 2019. Both had worked on that same face on the same days as he had. 3 names from one season, spread across different mountains and different months. The Italian statistics for that winter also reflect the rise in incidents. Over the season, the country recorded 80 avalanche incidents, 18 of which ended in tragedy. 133 people were caught in avalanches, 26 did not come back, twice as many as the season before. Figures that are normally spread over the whole length of a winter came together that year in a few weeks. In February 2021, Italy passed a law requiring avalanche equipment off the groomed pistes. The sources draw no direct causal link with this story. The document had been prepared in advance and was passed in the same period. Beyond that begins the zone where there are no answers at all. Nothing has survived about the outcome of the official investigation. It isn't known which of the two was in front. It isn't known whether they were going up at that moment or already coming down. The slab could have been shifted by a step, a turn, or a chance load on a weak spot, but that couldn't be established. The exact sequence of events is unknown as well. There were no witnesses and no video, and the traces on the slope had been changed by the avalanche. All that's left is what can be listed. 5 7,000ers of the former Soviet Union closed in full, a program no Italian had finished before him, a first ascent and a first ski descent on an unclimbed summit in the Karakoram. Skis clicked on at 8,080 meters on Nanga Parbat and kilometers of face beneath them. 2 nights at 7,000 meters beside a partner he didn't leave, and a February Monday 20 kilometers from his own home. A man who climbed 5 7,000ers and skied down from 8,000 meters stayed in the mountains that were home to him. Not in the Himalaya, not in the Karakoram, not on a route people prepare for over years. On a slope he had skied dozens of times and which on that day was a different one.